Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com, and today we are in bonus chess time. After 11 rounds in the 2017 U.S. Chess Championships, we have a tie at the top. Wesley So and Alex Onischuk, and today we will be playing a tiebreaker today. They have two games. Each side will get the white side once, and they have 25 minutes on their clocks. There's no incremental move in this position, which means, a lot of times in chess, after you move, you get 15 seconds or you get 30 seconds additional time. Not so the case in this tiebreaker. 25 minutes after that's gone, you will lose. If we have a tie after that, we get into an Armageddon sudden death match, which is kind of crazy. Not my favorite, but very, very exciting way to end. So we'll go ahead and get started. Wesley So does have the white pieces in game one and starts with pawn to c4, which is met by pawn to e6 and then knight to c3. A lot of times we see kind of a Queen's Gambit decline line. The c4 just immediately gets into d4 and d5. But, a lot of times in rapid style, we see just crazy openings that we don't typically see in a longer game. And that's what we get from knight to c3, knight f6, pawn to e4. So this is the floor mechanics in the English opening. Interesting that Alex decided to go for this. Black doesn't typically fare well. If you look at the database for, highest level play in this opening, Black very rarely wins, and White has a huge advantage in the win column. So we will continue. A pawn down here to d5, trying to break up the center. Pawn takes on d5, recaptured, then pawn up here to e5, attacking the knight, and the knight comes down here to e4. It's a nice little outpost move. White can kick it off if he wants to, or he could just play up here, pawn to d4, just solidified, not worry about the knight right now, because if there is an exchange, he could recapture with his pawn here, and that's going to be completely fine. He would control the center of the board right there. Continues normal development with knight to f3, bishop down here to f5, and then bishop to e2. And Wesley So actually played this opening against Nakamura not too long ago, and in that game he played pawn to d4. And if you were kind of watching the coverage live, they went over this. Wesley So decided that probably Alex had looked at that specific game, knowing that he got into the floor mechanics opening on his own, and so he's familiar with that. So Wesley So decided to change it up a little bit. He's very familiar with this opening, having played it himself, and decided to go ahead and play bishop e2 first. Bishop to e7, and then castle on the king side. He had a few options. Some of the options that we were looking at during the live coverage was queen to b3. This does attack both the pawn here on d5, with both the knight and the queen attacking it. Also attacking this square here on b7, since the live square bishop has come out, no longer defending that square. But after White decides to castle on the king side, then we have castle on the king side for Black as well, and then queen to b3, attacking this square. And this is where Alex started to take a lot of time thinking. Remember, you only have about 25 minutes. He thought for almost 9 minutes and played knight here to c6. He recognizes that he castled on the king side, which makes a lot of sense for king side safety, but he did kind of leave this pawn exposed here on d5 after queen to b3. Decided to somewhat just give that up and continue with normal development, but spending 9 minutes, he only has 15 minutes remaining on his clock after only the 9th move here. So after knight to c6, we do see the knight take up here on d5, and then bishop down here to c5. And he had a couple other options. He could have tried knight to c5, attacking the queen. Queen could come up here to c4, bishop here to e6, just consolidate a little bit in the middle of the board. Knight takes on e7, taking the bishop. Queen takes e7. White does have the bishop pair here, but then Black has some counterplay. Knight here to e4, queen to e3. All of a sudden, Black can get his rooks involved into the game. I don't think this is necessarily that bad for Black. Decides to go ahead and bring his bishop down here to a c5, and then knight down here to e3. And this is interesting because knight to e3 is probably the best move that everyone kind of found for Wesley So, and he did find it. This bishop is attacking the pawn here on f2. So one of the moves that we thought might be played was pawn to d3, attacking this knight right here. But from here, we could just see knight to f2, and you're not going to see the rook take, because then the just the bishop recaptures. That's probably not good. So maybe now pawn pushes to d4, knight or bishop back here to e6, attacking the knight. If we do see an exchange on board, that's probably going to be fine for black. Queen back here to c2, and then we could see some exchange on board, and that up here to g4. If the bishop takes, that's fine. Queen comes down here to d4, check, and attacking the bishop as well. If instead bishop takes on c6, you know, we could just take it back right away with our pawn. So either way, I think this was a very good find for Wesley. So he found this in only about a minute. To play knight back here to e3, since you have a central knight here on d5, it's protected by your queen. Sometimes bringing it back is not the easiest find, but he found it correctly, recognized that this bishop attacking the square here on f2 with support from the knight was just a huge variation that he didn't want to have to go down and calculate a lot. And knowing that his opponent is kind of in a time crunch right now, he wants to continue with his path of, I'm fine right now. I have a pawn advantage, so let's not go down any crazy lines. Let's just force our opponent to spend a lot of time, see if they can make mistakes, continue with normal chess. So bishop back here to g6, since it was being attacked from the knight here on e3, and then queen takes on a b7. It could have decided now to play pawn to d3, since the knight on e3 is stopping some of that threat. I think pawn to d3 makes a lot of sense, kicking the knight back here, potentially g5. Now the queen can take. Knight down here to d4. We could see an exchange in the center of the board, but that does give white an extra pawn of material if he wanted to, with I think a maybe slightly better position. Decides to go ahead and play queen to b7 first. Now knight down to d4. We do see the exchange on board, and now pawn to d3. So slightly different variation that got us kind of to the same point. But now knight over here to c5, which is a little bit different than if we played it originally. Then the knight might have come over here to g5. But knight to c5, attacking the queen. The queen comes back down here to b5, and then rook over here to b8, attacking the queen. Wesley so retreats the queen back here to c4, and then knight up here to e6. And there's kind of two options. Knight to e6 makes sense. Even rook over here to e8 seems pretty good. Knight to e6, this protects his bishop here on d4. He's both protecting it with his knight and his queen here on d8. But this also opens up the door for pawn to c5. This is going to be a great move later on for Alex if he can find it. It really cements this bishop here on d4 as a great little outpost. And it also allows him to get his queen free and not have to defend this bishop with his queen or his knight. He could just defend it with his pawn here on c5. But plays knight here to e6, which I think is a great move. Also allows him to bring that knight over to the king side of the board if he wants to attack that. Pawn to f4, so very aggressive way for Wesley So to start to attack on the king side. Also preparing for this pawn to just push forward up here to f5. Now from here we see Alex play bishop takes down on b2. I think this was a huge opportunity. It's very, very difficult to find pawn here to c5. But then after pawn pushes forward to f5, as we talked about, the queen no longer has to worry about defending this. So now the queen can get involved. Queen down here to g5. This is threatening the knight here on e3. That would be a check, and so you can't really take material. But if you were to take on e6, which I think would be a mistake, then bishop to e3, king here to h1, queen takes material there on e5, and then maybe the bishop takes, queen takes down here on e3, and this is going to be a fine position for black. Did not find the c5 move, instead decided to go ahead and play bishop down here to b2. Didn't take too long to think about it. Rook here to b1, so he is, protecting this material. He does have his rook up here, but he could decide to go ahead and exchange some material off the board. Wesley So, since he's up in material, Wesley's probably more inclined to start trading off material, because if he can consolidate pieces down, he's going to have a better end game. So that's kind of what Wesley So is looking to do. Alex really needs to find a path where he can start to find an advantage even though he is down in material. Queen down here to d4, and this is another one of those places where he probably had a better move. He just doesn't have a lot of time left. He has, 6 or 7 minutes at this point. He could have played knight to d4. He does have a bishop and the queen both protecting this. He could later on even play pawn to c5 if he wanted to solidify this a little bit more. But this threatens the knight coming down here to e2. So if we were to see rook takes on b2, which makes a lot of sense. Now rook takes, bishop takes back on b2. Now knight down here to e2, check. King over here to h1, and then queen to h4 is kind of that great move where it sets up essentially a draw if black wanted to go down that path. Rook to d1, knight up here to g3. The pawn can't take it because it's being pinned down from the queen. So this is probably the best find that black could have had, knowing that Wesley So has a better position. He could have played that knight to d4. Great little central square for this knight, and then probably come out with a draw here. But decided to play queen to d4. That's met by the rook takes. Now the rook takes, and then the rook is being defended by the queen. So that's part of the reason that he had that there. And then bishop up here to g4. Now I think in this position, black has kind of two moves that he can go with. He could either say, Wesley So has a huge attack going on. I'm going to start to gobble up some of the big material. Maybe my opponent just has a pawn advantage at the end and I can squeeze out a draw. I think if you're going down that path, you just go ahead and take this queen here on c4 and say, I'm going to take your biggest material piece. With the bishop here to g4, Wesley So is threatening pawn up here to f5 with the fork of the knight and the bishop. But one of the moves he actually has is queen to b6. This does a couple things. It keeps the knight being pinned down to the king. That's very important. It also protects the rook here on b2. But it also, there's kind of this discovered attack after pawn to b5. Now the rook can come up to b4. It's still protecting this rook, and now it's attacking the queen and the bishop. Once the queen moves, then this bishop's going to fall. The knight can't recapture because it's still being pinned down from this queen. So that would have been a nice find. Alex, I think, did make a mistake in this position. This is one of those, they kind of asked him about it and said, just didn't calculate nearly as long as he needed to, just because he didn't have enough time. He played rook here to b4, and that was met with the queen takes. Now the knight takes, but then pawn to f5. It's the fork that white was going for. Now he really doesn't have to worry about all those threats. The bishop can't fall. It's being protected by the knight. It's no longer being pinned down from the queen. So this gets a little dangerous. Now knight down here to f4, and then the great find from Wesley So. Also didn't take him very long to find it because he's just been a machine lately. And that is knight down here to c2. And this is one of those where sometimes it can be very difficult to have kind of a central knight and move that backwards in some way. But what this does is it opens up for this dark square bishop to attack the knight. This rook is also attacking the knight. It's attacking the rook. Also, this pawn is still attacking the bishop right here. And so there's just not a lot of great squares for Alex to go. He's just being under attack for so many different places. He's almost forced to move his rook right now because you don't want to lose, that major piece going into the end part of the end game. And so after rook here to a4, then bishop takes on f4. Can't even recapture that because the rook is protecting that. Now he has to worry about his bishop over here on g6, and the pawn comes down here to h5. Okay, bishop comes back here to d1. There's going to be a discovered attack after the knight moves, attacking the rook here on a4. Bishop comes back here to h7. Now knight to e3 as we talked about. The rook does decide to go ahead and come down here to a2, take material, but that's fine because Wesley So finds this great attack, just starts pushing his pawns and says, there's just no real way for you to stop me. And you can see this light square bishop on h7 is kind of trapped because the knight here on e3 just doing a great job of controlling the center of the board with his knights, maneuvering it around to exactly the right squares. After the pawn takes, bishop up here to b3, both attacking the pawn, pinning it to the king, and attacking the rook. Rook is forced to move, come over here to e2, but all of Wesley So's pieces are protected so well. So pawn to e6, getting ready to push that forward. Rook over here to e8, that's fine. Let's push it forward. There's no way to really kind of stop the attack that's going on right here. While Alex would like to take the pawn, this was a discovered attack, so he is forced to move, and so he plays king over here to h8, and then bishop up here to g5, protecting this pawn, and at the end of the day, there's just no way to really stop this. Next move, we could just play rook to f8. Alex is in a tough position, so he decides to go ahead and resign this game. So that is game one. We are not going to be looking at game two. If you want to go look at that, you definitely can. It was a longer game. That game did end in a draw. So I was able to make one video, decided to go ahead and make the video on this one since it was an exciting match and Wesley So did win this one. So at the end of the day, Wesley So is the champion. Ended up not losing a game at the U.S. Chess Championship. So congratulations to him. Finally does have that U.S. Chess Championship, and as we've said before, came in as the heavy favorite. He's been the hottest chess player in the world, doesn't seem to be stopped by anyone, so congratulations to him. Great chess played throughout the entire tournament, and Alex Onischuk, I think, played an amazing tournament, well above what he's used to play. He doesn't even play that many tournaments. And for him to come in and perform as well as he did, I mean, if he won yesterday, he would be in the outright champion. But getting that draw, coming in here to a very tough challenger and a tiebreaker, someone that has probably way more experience in rapid chess than he does. I thought he played pretty well in game two. Actually played extremely well. Wesley So defended a fierce attack by Alex with the white pieces. At the end of the day, it was exciting. Congratulations to Wesley So. Thanks, everyone, for watching the tournament coverage, and I will see you guys in the next tournament coverage. Thanks again. Bye.